Tonight's webinar is on the dental career paths. And the schedule is as follows. I will do an introduction of each Pennsylvania Dental Association member, their current position, how they decided their path, experience and journey, the pros and cons they found, challenges they faced, and what they wish they knew sooner. And then we will do some pre-submitted questions, and any additional questions you can either type in the chat box or feel free to unmute. And then we will go over some PDA programs, the mentoring program, as well as the next webinar, and then a post-event survey at the end. So tonight our presenters are Dr. Rupali Kulkarni. She is in public health and academia. Dr. Nipa Tucker, she is a practice owner. Dr. Charles Foer, he is an owner of a DSO. Dr. Janine Burkhart, she works for a nonprofit. And Dr. Roosevelt Allen is in military and insurance. So Dr. Kulkarni, you can start us off.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope that you get a lot of good information out of today's webinar. So to start, I am a full-time faculty member. I'm an assistant professor of oral medicine at Penn, and I also serve as the assistant director of our oral medicine residency program. So multiple hats within the realm of dentistry and also in academics. To be honest, I never thought I would end up in academics. I always imagined myself working in a private practice. But when I started dental school, I fell in love with the specialty oral medicine, and people always have questions about that. What is that and what do you do? Is it pathology? Do you ever pick up a handpiece? So oral medicine is really the intersection of dentistry and medicine. It's all clinical in nature. So most of my day-to-day is actually seeing patients. But it's essentially the specialty that treats medical conditions that affect the mouth and jaws. So I see a lot of patients with mucosal diseases, with jaw issues or jaw pain, manifestations of other diseases that they might have in their body, issues with their salivary glands. So it's a whole large scope of practice. And that also includes treating patients who are deemed more medically complex. And I've even served as a faculty member in our Persons with Disabilities clinic. So being able to teach pre-doc and residents how to work with individuals with physical, developmental, and intellectual disabilities. So I fell in love with this specialty and realized that one, it's really great for hospital practice, but two, more importantly, I learned how special it was to build relationships with mentors throughout my life, people who have guided me in the right direction, but even those who taught me, the basics of dentistry. And I knew that I wanted to have that same impact on students. And so I put all of sort of my interests and passions together and decided to be full-time faculty as a new dentist. And this sort of goes into what I wish I knew. I wish I had known actually that you can do sort of everything that you want to do. You could be full-time faculty, you could be part-time, you can be more clinical. There's different sort of academic tracks that you can decide on. So the one that I'm on, I get to see patients 4 out of the 5 days of the week. And I do research. I get to mentor students and residents in research projects. And I also get to teach, which I really enjoy. So that's both clinical teaching and also didactic teaching. So I think there's some things to be aware of. I think people always say, oh, well, I just finished school. I don't want to be back in it. And I always think it's great if you want to get some, hands-on experience or some sort of other practice model you want to pursue and then bring that knowledge back later on in your career. So I think academics is something that's always there, no matter what stage of your career you're at. People always say, oh, like, how much money am I going to make? I feel like I'm not going to make as much. Here's the pro. Your benefits are great, which I wish someone had told me that. Your health, insurance, your life and disability insurance, your retirement plan. Everything has really set me up for success. And my goal is to stay in academics. I would like to continue on in my journey in higher education. If you're really passionate about wanting to start your own practice or being your own boss, then I would say that's a con of being in academics, because you certainly still do, work with staff that you perhaps aren't the person, who have hired or fired. And, you do certainly have, oversight, and you have a boss. But if you're lucky, you'll have a boss like mine who is extremely supportive. I get to go do CE all across the country that gets fortunately paid for if I want to, attend a dental conference or even want to be able to speak at one. And so I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to continue learning while you're at an academic institution. So I practice at the school, but I also practice in the hospital system. So I get a little bit of both. I think one of the challenges I would highlight is when you're a new dentist, it can be a little daunting to also be the person that has to teach. And I always got the question of, do you ever feel like you have imposter syndrome? But I think we embrace this belief of practice, right? You're not always going to have all of the answers. So I feel like I got a lot more respect when I had told my students, I'm not sure, like, let's learn together. Let's figure it out together. And especially with my residents, because it's kind of funny, some of them are older than me, but I've been really lucky to build such good relationships with them. And I feel like I learned so much from my students and residents as well. I actually wish I had known that there was opportunities also for like public health, loan forgiveness, or that there are clinical fellowships that you can do if you're concerned about, of course, the financial debt that you take on in dental school, and that there are ways to, support your sort of academic career while you're also, trying to pay back your loans. So for me, it's been extremely rewarding to be in academics. To highlight very briefly the public health part of it, I got my master's of public health while I was in dental school, and I get to do research in public health. I get to help with some of the clinical public health sites that we work at and support the clinicians there. So I've been able to integrate what I learned in my master's pretty much every day, in really an interdisciplinary manner of care, but also in, like I said, the research I get to do. And it's also helped me connect with sort of the entire Philadelphia community. I've been able to contribute to projects that help those who are underserved, those who are socially at risk, and those who are experiencing homelessness. So those are some of the populations that I'm passionate about supporting. And I've had the chance to do that while being faculty. So for me, if I could do it all over again, I would absolutely hands down pick this again. And I hope that I continue in academics for the rest of my career. So I will certainly be able to answer questions near the end, but I'm sure you're all excited to hear from some of my colleagues about their paths. So thank you.
Thanks, Rupali. Yep, I'm Nipa Tucker. I'm a general dentist. I have my own practice I've owned for a little under 7 years now in Westchester, Pennsylvania, so a little west of Philadelphia. It is a small, what we call concierge or direct care practice. So we are fee for service. We don't participate with insurance companies. Small, staff of 5. And we, everybody participates, everybody jumps in, everybody's a part of the team. We take care of one patient at a time. There's never more than 2 people in the office and 2 patients in the office at any one time, which has just been the way that I've chosen to maintain the cadence of the practice. And so it's a very special thing, in my opinion. We've worked very hard to curate that experience for the people that we serve in the community. So I decided on this career path. My dad's a dentist, so I grew up in the waiting room, as it goes. My dad used to throw me in Op 4, which was the room he hardly used. He'd put the chair up as high as it would go, so I couldn't get down because he had patients to see, and he'd throw a coloring book in there, and that's kind of the way that I grew up. So I was very comfortable in the dental space, and I was an art teacher, actually, and I liked science. So when I had the opportunity to purchase the art studio that I worked at, I had to have a real heart-to-heart with my dad. And he said, I like that for you, but I don't love that for you. And I've always seen you being somebody who would do well in dentistry. Would you at least consider going? Would you consider applying? So I did, and I'm really glad I did. I think he had a good eye for maybe what I couldn't see yet. So I'm glad that I chose this path for myself. And practice ownership felt very natural for me. Again, I grew up in that space, so I understood what the good and the bad would look like. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So, I graduated from dental school. I did a residency. I did a GPR in Reading, Pennsylvania. I did a residency because I'm actually from New York. And one of the requirements of going back to New York is that you complete a residency. So that was the intention, was to go home and to practice with my dad. But in my time at Temple and then with residency, I really fell in love with Pennsylvania, and I really felt like I had made connections and I had made friends, and I really felt at home. And so I chose to stay. I worked everywhere in the 5 years from graduating residency to purchasing my practice. I worked in nursing homes. I worked out of the trunk of my car doing dentistry at home, in patients' houses for a contracting agency. I worked in an insurance-based practice. I worked in charity care practice in Berwick. I worked in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, which is a very rural part of Pennsylvania. It's where the PA Grand Canyon is. So I really challenged myself to see everything there was to see surrounding this profession, and sort of by process of elimination, I landed very intentionally where I am now. So I was able to see the things that, while I did well, I didn't quite enjoy. And I think that that's the challenge for all of you, is to take the time to reflect and be introspective about, you'll be good at a lot of things, but that doesn't mean you have to do all of them. You have to choose what's right for you, what's your path, what's your journey, and sort of just stay true. And I think that that's been really important all along the way. So pros and cons of practice ownership. There are many of both. I will say that one of the biggest pros is the autonomy. So the ability to make the decisions that affect how I practice and the patients that I serve, from something as, inconsequential as like the size of the micro brush that I'm going to use, to the temperature in the office, to something as important as, am I going to take that vacation? Because if I do, that affects the livelihood of 4 people who I love and cherish, and their paychecks the next pay period. So I think that that's really important to recognize that, like as they say, I guess as Marvel says, with great power comes great responsibility. So I think it's just important to take the time to reflect on that, and to know that while that's a very compelling pro, it's also a heavy weight if you don't manage it responsibly. Some of the cons is, this is not a 9 to 5, right? So when you own a practice, you don't switch the lights off and go home. You just switch to a more passive ownership, from 5 to 9. So it doesn't stop, it just changes. And so I'm always thinking about my practice. I'm always thinking about what to do better and how to manage effectively, and come back stronger the next day. And I think that that's, for me, okay. And I think that compartmentalizing is a really important part of it, and knowing how to sort of quiet the noise, but know that when you own a practice, it's yours, and the buck stops with you. And I think that that's really important. So I take it very seriously, and I think one ought to, if you want to go that route. Challenges I faced, I don't know. There's been a lot here and there. There's just been like a small pandemic, and like a couple of other little, like the huge loan, so a couple of things like that sure wish maybe I didn't have to deal with. But overall, I think all those challenges have made for a stronger practice. So, for example, during the pandemic, when we were being advised to slow down, right, to really disinfect between patients and be deliberate about their care and the traffic of the patients, and to make sure that there wasn't like a lot of interaction, that's when our practice really shined. That's when it became clear that one such as mine, where we have always been deliberate to be slow and intentional, now we were valuable, in the community. Now people were seeking that care. They really wanted to be the only patient in the office. They really needed that. And so we ended up with a lot of immunocompromised patients, a waiting list actually, which, while that sounds like a good thing, can also be a problem on the back end. So it just seems like, again, with practice ownership, there are always going to be things that seem really good that can be challenges, and it's just a matter of how you take the time to recalibrate. Things I wish I knew sooner. I mean, I don't know. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got when I purchased my practice was, that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So take your time. I'm a pretty impulsive buyer. I will say I have purchased a lot of crap that I wish I hadn't. I have and we all have our little like equipment skeleton closet. So I've started collecting my own. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, I wish I had remembered, I wish I had like tattooed that somewhere. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So when you go to a class and you hear, you got to buy it, that doesn't mean you got to buy it. That means keep it in the back of your mind. The hard sells, this deal's only good till midnight tonight. That's never a deal, just hold on. So I think that's some of the things that I wish, that I knew sooner and that I really reflected on more. So I just say that for any of you that are considering practice ownership, there's a lot of persuasion involved in practice ownership from outside entities, companies, things of that nature. It's just important to stay true to your core philosophy of practice, really where you want to go, have a vision, know what the 5-year plan looks like, know what you want that patient experience to be, and then try to stay true to it because there's a lot of noise. So it's just important to be very deliberate in how you conduct yourself. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Hey, I'm glad everybody's here tonight. I think it's awesome that you folks are dedicating some time to learning a little bit about dentistry. My current position is I'm CJ4, but did I say that? CJ4. I own a mid-sized DSO, Progressive Dental Concepts. We have about 20 practices, all located in central Pennsylvania. I've had kind of an interesting career journey, and I'll try to be very brief in that because it's a long story, because you can see I'm not the youngest one in the group. My dad, Dr. Talker, was also a dentist. So I was always going to go into private practice, and indeed I did. That's how it was for most of us in 1983. We didn't think there were too many other choices. The pluses to private practice are lots of independence and lots of choices. The cons, long hours engaged in non-clinical stuff. I think that was pointed out as a con, and I found that to be so. I went from private practice to 30 years into my career. Much to my chagrin, shame, and embarrassment, I was bought out by Heartland Dental. I say that now, little tongue in cheek, because I really did not want to be a corporate dentist. And I thought that corporate dentistry was the nastiest, ugliest thing in the universe. And I just didn't want to do that. But I didn't want to buy my partners out either. So Heartland Dental bought my practice, asked me to teach for them because I have many years experience teaching in a general residency in addition to doing private practice. I told them to pound sand. They came back to me a few months later and said, why don't you want to teach for us? And I told them that I didn't teach corporate bullshit. They were very kind to me and said, what do you teach? And I told them that I've taught since I have been 40 years old, that if we take care of our patients, the money follows. So they were kind enough to let me teach that. And by the end of my journey in Heartland, I was managing practices in 12 states, in addition to practicing a couple days a week. So a couple of my buddies decided that this might be a great idea for us to form our own DSO. I told them it was idiotic, but we did it anyway. We've had some success in that. But it's certainly, I'm lucky enough to have a DSO that mirrors my private practice. It's totally patient-centered. I work with my doctors, mentor my doctors, that's the kind of care we expect and enjoy. And the better we do for our patients, the better off we all are. So my personal challenges have been my nerdball nature. I wanted to always be kind of a top-notch dentist, so I ended up taking every CE course that ever offered, just like you bought all the equipment that's ever offered. I did some of that too, and I also took every course, and I'm a master in the Academy of General Dentistry, which was a fun journey to go on. The thing that I wish I had known sooner is the secret to how to talk to patients to help them want what we know they need. If I had known that early in my career, I wouldn't have spent hours on end failing to get patients to move forward with appropriate dental care. So that's what I try to help my younger doctors with, is to work on their communications as well as their dental skills. And I just want to say, thanks to the PDA, it has been a huge part of my life. PDA has done so much for me. I have had every position in the Harrisburg Area Dental Society that you can possibly imagine. It's brought joy to my life. It's made a lot of lifelong friendships. And so I thank you, and I thank you for having me on the panel.
Thank you. I'm Janine Burkhart. I'm currently a dental director at Project Home, which is a nonprofit in Philadelphia, and I work in their FQHC at the Stephen Klein Wellness Center location. So I kind of got interested in the public health path. I was always interested in community service, and in college I had a job in the community service office as well. And then I went to dental school at Temple, and I really saw how much need there was just right here in Philadelphia. And it was difficult at times to know that somebody might have really needed treatment, but perhaps didn't have the money for the treatment, and there was only so much you can do. So that really kind of pushed me to want to stay in or be in a public health field. But I also really wanted to be in Philadelphia, similar to how Dr. Tucker said that she had, kind of a network in Pennsylvania. That's how I felt in Philadelphia. And at the time, unfortunately, I didn't find any public health positions. So I did go into a private practice briefly. And I think I maybe would have loved private practice. I just didn't find the right office. So it became evident pretty quickly that that wasn't going to be the right fit for me. But fortunately, at that time, when I went looking for a new position, this position was opening up for a dental director at Project Home. And it was also in Philadelphia, which was nice. So I didn't really know that I can take on the director role because I was still pretty fresh. But what I had learned was I was pretty independent in the office I was working in already. So it wasn't as much my clinical skills that I needed help with, just more of learning how to run the office. So that was one of my big challenges at first. But I went to Project Home. I opened their dental department in 2015. And then every year we kind of added a couple operatories. So we now have 9 operatories, 3 dentists, and we also brought in dental students a few years after we opened too. So it's been exciting to just kind of keep things growing. In terms of pros and cons, so speaking generally for FQHCs rather than like the director position, I think positives are that you can really help people that need it, and you're not worried about if they can afford it. You just kind of are able to make things work and get them the treatment that they need. So I never feel like I'm selling treatment to a patient. We also get to provide integrated care because in an FQHC, we have a medical team located just over across the hall. We have behavioral health team. They also can come in during our dental visits for some very tricky patients. And so that's been really helpful. And even as a new grad, when I started, if I was treating a medically complex patient, just being able to connect with the medical provider right there was really beneficial. Similar to Dr. Kulkarni in academia, we also have lots of benefits, PTO, short-term, long-term disability, retirement packages. So that's been really helpful. As far as some cons of working in an FQHC, so we do still have to be financially sustainable in some way. So we have to figure out whether that's through the revenue we're generating from our appointments, or if we're getting donors and working on fundraising. So sometimes we could have pressures in different ways. So while we may not be pushed to sell these really high-end treatments or cases, sometimes the pressure could come in terms of numbers. So how many patients you need to see a day. But I think every office that you'll be in, there's some sort of goal that you'd have to hit just to be able to be sustainable. We also do have a high number of no-shows. So for me, who's a real planner, I like to come in, have my day all planned out. That can all be completely different, a few hours into the day where your patient didn't show up and somebody else came in. So you just have to kind of learn to adapt and be ready for anything that's going to walk in the door. And then I'd say another con is you can't always provide the ideal treatment that you'd like. So for instance, we don't do any orthodontics, we don't do any implants, we don't do molar endo. So for patients that really want that, we have to figure out ways we can refer them, but they might not be able to afford that. So depending upon which office you're in, treatment could be limited. What else? For challenges. So I think one big challenge is just the patient population that we work with. Oftentimes the patients, because of all their experiences in their life, they might have faced certain traumas, and the dental office is a very vulnerable place to be when you are coming in with all that trauma in your past. So it's really difficult to work with some of the patients. It's doing more than just treating that tooth. It's really treating the whole person. And sometimes the dental visit can almost become like a therapy session, which is both good and bad. But it's been nice to be able to connect with the patients. I'd say another challenge that I faced is working with non-dental staff people in leadership. I had to do a lot of advocacy for myself and for my team. And, I always am ready to stand up and do it, but in some health centers, they may not be able to, and may end up with more of an operations focus, which can be a little difficult. Learning how to manage an FQHC was really difficult in the beginning, but I luckily found a lot of great resources and networks through Organized Dentistry to help me with that. And then for what I wish I knew sooner, similar to Dr. Foer in terms of communication, I think that that's really key, because what I had learned, especially taking on my role very shortly after graduating, I thought clinical treatment was going to be the hardest part of my job, but that wasn't the hard part at all. Like, it came naturally. I did tons of CEs and they helped, but really it's communicating with the patient, and you'll realize that you really have to treat the patient, their unique needs, address their social determinants of health, be able to communicate with them, establish their trust, and that's how you're going to actually be able to get your patient to a state of oral health. So that was an interesting challenge and thing that I wish I knew beforehand. And I think that's all that's coming to me now, but I'm sure a lot more things will come up as we get through to the questions. Now I'll pass it to Dr. Allen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity for me to share with you some of my experiences. Like Dr. Foyer, I finished dental school in the mid-'80s, so you may not be the oldest person on here, Dr. Foyer. I'm going to take the opportunity. First of all, let me also apologize. My camera seems to have a mind of its own. It goes on and goes off. So if it goes off, I'll turn it back on as soon as I can. I'm going to take a few minutes to share with you a little bit about my career. I spent about 32 years in the military, so I feel like I'm pretty much an expert when it comes to military dentistry. But in my current position, I'm the Chief Dental Officer at United Concordia Dental, which is a dental insurance carrier here in central Pennsylvania. So after I speak about my military career, I'll also share with you a little bit about the insurance industry and some of the things related to that. As far as how did I decide on the military, it was actually pretty simple. I did it for selfish reasons. When I graduated from dental school in the mid-'80s, interest rates were very high. I had already borrowed a significant amount of money to go to dental school. And while I wanted to go into private practice, I did not want to borrow money at 16 and 18%. And so I took the opportunity to join the military, because joining the military, I could defer my student loans. I had an opportunity to really improve my skills and really practice. And then the third thing is that I would have an opportunity to do some traveling and see the world. Now, originally, I'd only planned to stay in the military for 3 years. 3 years turned into 32. As far as my experience and journey, I was a clinician for about 20 years. I saw patients daily. I saw patients all over the United States as well as all over the world. I've lived in places like Louisiana, Texas, North Dakota, Arizona, Delaware, Virginia, Washington, D.C. a few times. And I've had assignments in Senegal, West Africa, where I've seen patients in austere environments. I've had deployments to Turkey and Iraq. I've been to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where I've treated patients. And I've also spent time in Kyrgyzstan, where I actually ran a hospital. Uh, Other experiences in the military and as a military dentist, there are generally three career paths you can pursue. You can pursue a path as a clinician, and I did that, as I mentioned, for about 20 years. You can also be an educator. I actually commanded an AEGD residency program for about 5 years, where I had about 14 different specialists, and we took students right out of dental school and put them into an AEGD residency program in the military. And then I had an opportunity to do more senior leadership. I've run medical facilities. Well, I've also run dental clinics first, and then I moved up and I've actually run medical facilities, and I've actually commanded a medical center with about 1,600 people. When I finished my time in the military, I was actually at the Pentagon. I was in charge of all healthcare operations and research for the Air Force Medical Service. I will share with you that I was very fortunate in the military that I was able to be promoted up to the rank of two-star general. So when I retired in 2018 out of the Pentagon, I was a major general. And then that is sort of when I made the decision to join United Concordia. As far as pros and cons of the military, there are lots. And some of those, they kind of go both ways. As far as pros, I think you have the opportunity to deliver the type of care that members need and not worry about the expense. If a member in the military needs something, you can really go ahead and provide that and not worry about whether or not they can afford it. I think also a pro is that you have the opportunity to pursue specialty training. There are a number of specialty opportunities in the military. We have all of the residency programs in the military. And anything you want to pursue, you can do that. And I think that's an advantage because the number of people that you're competing against as comparison to some of the civilian programs, it's not as large. Meaning if someone is interested in pursuing an endodontic residency, they may be competing against 10 people for 2 or 3 slots. It's much greater than that in the civilian population, as you know. So I think that's one of the pros. I think the travel opportunities is also a pro. And then, like I said, I think there are lots of job opportunities. You can be a clinician, you can be an educator, you can go into executive leadership. But in the military, there are other opportunities as well. I used to work at Dover Air Force Base, so I did forensic dentistry for 2 years. I've seen over 80 different cases where I've had an opportunity to help identify the remains of individuals associated with forensic dentistry. We also have dental informatics. And then you also have the opportunity to do other things. You can move away from being in dentistry. You can be an executive officer for a general if you wish to do that. You can do other things and then come back into dentistry. So I think that's one of the pros. I think a con associated with the military is very much like the pro is the constant moves. I think that can be very difficult. It can extremely be difficult for family members. Many times you're picking up every 2 or 3 years and you and your family are moving to a different area. While that can be exciting, it also can be very challenging, especially if you have a spouse. Your spouse, it's very difficult for them to have, they pretty much do lateral moves, or it's very difficult for them to move up in their career. And it can be very difficult for your children, especially as they reach middle school and high school. When you're taking them out away from their friends, you're not liked very much by your kids when you're doing those types of things. And so many times you end up leaving your family in a particular assignment so that your child can finish high school or they can finish something else before you reunite as a family. So I think that in itself can be very challenging. As far as a con and a challenge, what did I wish I knew sooner when it comes to the military? I don't think it's what I knew sooner. I think it's what I wish I had taken advantage of. When I was in dental school, there were a number of recruiters who were coming around talking to us about the military, and they were providing scholarships to students. And I said to myself, why do I want to do that? I'm not going into the military. I don't want your money. I'm going to go into private practice. So I would have, if I had taken advantage of some of the scholarships that were available through the military, I wouldn't have been in the amount of debt I was in for so many years that it took me to get out of that debt when it came to my education in dental school. I will share with you, however, that my daughter just graduated from dental school. And my daughter graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University, and she was much smarter than I am because she took advantage of those scholarships. She's actually graduated in May of this year, and she joined the Air Force, but she received a full scholarship through the military, and all 4 years of her dental school was paid for. Now, she owes them 5 years of a commitment, but in the long run, for a $500,000 education, 5 years is really not a bad thing. Her first year is going to be a mandatory AEGD residency that she gets to do at the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs. And then she has 4 other years of payback that she has to do. So while I was a slow learner, she learned much faster than I did. So that's a good thing. Let me transition a little bit now to the insurance industry. When I left the military in 2018, I then joined United Concordia Dental here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in Camp Hill. I joined that and I made that decision primarily for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to continue to work with the military. And United Concordia, they have a number of government contracts. They work with what's called the Active Duty Dental Program and the TRICARE Dental Program, which are all affiliated with the military. I also wanted an opportunity to give back to others. And United Concordia works they have a number of Medicaid contracts. They work in the state of Pennsylvania, Delaware, as well as West Virginia. And so an opportunity to work with that population and to continue to serve was something that I was interested in. I was also made the decision to join United Concordia because much of their core values aligned with what I had focused on in the military, which was integrity, service before self, excellence in all that we do. Those are things that United Concordia sort of stood for as well when it came to their core values. So that's why I decided to join. My experience with United Concordia has been, like I said, only about 6 years, but I came in as a government dental director. I worked in that area for about 4 years, and then I was promoted to the chief dental officer. In that position, I really had an opportunity to work with a number of individuals across the organization dealing with quality assurance. I deal with fraud, waste, and abuse, utilization management, appeals and grievances. I have a number of other dental directors that I work very closely with, but I also get to do quite a bit of work external to United Concordia. I work with a number of academic institutions where I serve on the Dean's Advisory Board, and I really enjoy that because I enjoy education. I work with the 4 dental schools currently. I work with Howard University's College of Dentistry in Washington, D.C. I work with Temple's Dental School, which is in Philadelphia. I work with NYU and their dental school in New York. And lastly, I work with Harvard's dental school, which is in Boston. And that gives me the opportunity, as I said, to work with the deans and to work in that environment. And that is something that I enjoy. I also have an opportunity to work with some other boards as well. The Lancaster Cleft Palate is a board that focuses on providing care for those members that have cleft palates and other craniofacial abnormalities. And so I'm associated with that board, and I just really love doing that and giving back to the community. I guess some of the pros and cons of working in the insurance industry. Let me start with cons and the challenge. I think everybody feels that when you work in the insurance industry that you've crossed over into the dark side. I can't tell you how many people and how many of my friends, they give me a hard time because now I've chosen to work with the insurance company. I think another con is that it can be very difficult to recruit providers to aid in treating the Medicaid population. That is always seems to be a challenge. I get a lot of, I won't say complaints, but people talk about Medicaid members being difficult patients, not showing up. And so it's difficult to recruit providers in order to see those patients. But I try to take the time to explain to them, individuals who are on medical assistance or Medicaid, they're on it for a reason. And I want those providers to understand that, when you and I miss an appointment or we take time off from work, we get compensated for it. A number of those people, they don't. They're losing time off from work And that's part of their ability to put food on their table or to pay bills. And so I ask people to really try to work with him. I think the pros of being in United Concordia is that we really do have an opportunity to improve overall health care and overall health outcomes for a number of our members. And that is something that I really enjoy. What I wish I knew sooner about the insurance industry is just the different types of opportunities that are available, whether it's working as a dental consultant or dental advisor, or just the opportunities to work in various academic institutions. I had no idea that those opportunities existed. So that is something that you should consider as well for a potential career path. Other than that, that's all I have. I look forward to the questions.
All right, thank you, everyone. And we will go on to the pre-submitted questions now. So we'll start with Dr. Burkhart. Is working for an FQHC job worth it? And how do I go about finding an FQHC job?
So I think it's definitely worth it. I mean, right now I'm 9 years into my role at an FQHC, and I haven't left despite, the numerous challenges that we can face. The salary is great, the benefits are great, but I think what's even better is really working with a great integrated team. So you have medical and behavioral health right there, and it's just a great team to work and be with. But also we do have really appreciative patients. So like Dr. Allen was saying, the patients, they can be difficult. Sometimes they don't come, or maybe they come in and they do give you a hard time, but that's not because they don't like you. It's because something else really hard is going on in their life. So when you do treat them, you really can make such a big impact. And we find that so many of our patients are just so appreciative for the care that we provide. So I think that's what really keeps me in the FQHC world. As a new dentist, you also can work on your skills. So I think that's really helpful. You're not pressured to be amazing day one. There's room for growth, and other dentists there you can learn from too. For how to go about finding an FQHC job, I'll put some links in the chat. The best way I think is through the HRSA Workforce Connector. That's where a lot of FQHC jobs would be posted, as well as sites you can see what their HPSA score is, and it's an HPSA score. And with that, depending upon the score, the sites can be eligible for loan repayment or through the National Health Service Corps, or even for a scholarship. So that's really beneficial. And then the other one is the NOAA Job Board. So that's the National Network for Oral Health Access. A lot of health centers are members of that organization and will post their positions there. So I think those will get you off to a good start in finding a role.
All right, I think we're going to skip the next one, as I feel like most people answered that, and it's getting close to 8. So we'll skip to the third: how to set up a private dental office as a fresh graduate.
I'm happy to help, but I wasn't a fresh graduate and I didn't set up a private dental office. I purchased a practice, which I think is a great way of doing things, because a lot of the infrastructure was already built in, including, the initial inventory and the vendor relationships, the staff. So I think if you're looking for ways to get into private practice ownership, that is a very significant one to consider. My father opened in his career 4 practices from scratch startups, and I've seen that too. My husband's actually just 2 months into his own private practice. He's an allergist, and I'm seeing what that looks like, and that's a scratch startup. So I'm seeing both sides of it, and I really needed the, confidence and the manageability of something that had a structure in place. So for me, that was the right choice. I think that if you're doing something like this, it's important to make sure that the philosophy of the owner dentist and your philosophy of care really jive, that you really understand one another, that you can be honest with one another. I've seen a lot of relationships go sour because we're just not great communicators for some reason when it counts. So I think it's important to remember that there shouldn't be anything unsaid. This is probably one of the most important relationships of your life, and probably one of the hardest things emotionally that the owner dentist is going to do. And so it's just important to be very sensitive and respectful of that whole transition.
Okay, Any tips from going from an associate to ownership?
I can make a quick attempt to tackle that one since I've done all of this. I was an associate for 2 years. I think someone in the group, I think it was you, Janine, said that your private practice experience wasn't that great, or wasn't a fit for you. And in fact, 85% of associateships fail. That's just the way it is. So I think crucial is when you're searching, if you are searching for an associateship, is really take your time, find someone you think you're going to be a good match with. I believe that the agreement of how that's going to happen, how you're going to go to an owner, if you're either buying in or buying out, that should be negotiated before you sign the associateship agreement. If X, Y, and Z works out and we're a match, we should move on to ownership. Don't wait till 2 years into your relationship and go, hey, I guess we'll talk about it now and what's entailed and how you value the practice. It really has to be done up front. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, what are the positive and negative aspects of practicing in the state of Pennsylvania? If everyone wants to go through this one, just a short little statement, go ahead.
I'll start real quick, just since I'm on the head of I think Pennsylvania is a hidden gem. I also live in central Pennsylvania. I moved here. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. I deliberately picked this area. I think Pennsylvania is a hidden gem, got lots of great stuff to do. And patients here have been wonderful. So that's what I know.
For me, Pennsylvania is home, so that's one big perk of practicing in Pennsylvania. But I think in terms of our Medicaid, it could be a little bit better. Some states may cover crowns and root canals, which currently in Pennsylvania aren't covered, but fingers crossed, hopefully one day they will be. So I think Medicaid coverage that varies widely from state to state. So if there are certain things you want to do, really look at what the benefits are in those states. But Pennsylvania is awesome. We have the Pennsylvania Dental Association. We have an awesome group of dentists here to network with and be supported by and be friends with. So that's a big help.
I'm completely in line with Janine. I would say a con that I, notice is certainly our Medicaid reimbursement, which is challenging, given it varies so much state by state. But a huge positive is, and for many of us, this is where we grew up as a dentist in a sense, and where we gained a lot of our skills. And I think the community is just truly unique and irreplaceable. So as you're practicing and trying to continue to learn in your day-to-day, you want to be in a space where you have champions. And I would certainly say that's very present in this state.
I don't practice here in the state of Pennsylvania, but I will put in a plug for the Pennsylvania Coalition of Oral Health. It is a group that really does focus on improving access to care here in the state of Pennsylvania. And I would say take the opportunity to attend some of their courses and some of their summits that they have, because they do focus on really improving access and improving dental care here in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay, and I feel like we went over the pros and cons of private practice and DSO as well, so we'll go to the next slide. What are the advantages of working for academics compared to DSOs?
Do one of my academic friends want to talk about the advantages? I think we've talked about some of the advantages of academics, and I've been involved with academics, so I think academics is wonderful. It's a great fit. I probably would have really seriously considered that, but DSO is definitely there's a flavor for just about everyone. Once again, just like I advised on picking out an associateship, I would look the same way at DSOs. There are a DSO that might fit you. There is a DSO that might not fit you. They can be very similar to private practice, or they can be remarkably structured and rigid. So, so I think that you really, like everything else, buyer beware. If anybody ever wants to come and observe any of our offices at Progressive Dental, I'm giving an open invitation now, but buyer beware of all of us, including me. So
I can talk just a little bit about my time teaching in an AEGD residency in the Air Force. I think more than anything, one of the pros is that you really do help dentists develop their confidence in becoming more competent and proficient in the profession. But also, I think what you do is you help those individuals sort of hone in on what particular maybe specialty they want to pursue if they do a residency. Because that's what, like I said, I taught for 5 years in that residency. And there were a number of my residents, after being with me for a year, I would try to expose them to as much as I could in that residency. And a number of them decided they wanted to do ortho or they wanted to do endo because they had had the opportunity to actually work in that type of environment with those specialists. So that is what I see as one of the pros, really helping them to build up their confidence, but also helping them to really hone in on what particular area they may want to focus on when it comes to a specialty. Now that's related to AEGD.
I'm biased because academics is my life and I love it. I'll be honest, it's not necessarily for everybody. I think it's, you know, a very unique space to be in. But the one thing I'd like to highlight that I mentioned earlier is it's really not mutually exclusive with any other practice model. You know, we have many part-time faculty who also work, you know, for an FQHC or who also work for a practice. And we have many individuals who choose in their mid or late career to go into academics. So if it's something you're really passionate about, it's always there. And we're always looking for individuals who are passionate about teaching and inspiring the next generation to be a part of that. I think a huge advantage, like I said, for me was being able to combine a lot of my passions, especially as a new dentist, so I could learn earlier on what I enjoy doing within the scope of dentistry. And the fact that you have multiple different models of practice you can choose from. So similarly, in addition to my own residency program where I'm the assistant director, I also teach at a GPR program as well. So I get to, interact with those individuals who come from all over. And it's a really unique experience in a hospital setting to get to work with residents and also to build up, their confidence and knowledge, and absolutely to see if they're interested in other things and support them throughout their careers. So I think there's many advantages in looking at all of the practice models, but the good thing about academics is it's always there. So it's never too late, in my opinion, to be in academics.
Actually, I was going to say I taught at Penn for a while, and I lecture at a couple of residencies in addition to having my private practice, because my work schedule is Monday through Thursday. So I have those Fridays, and it's been really nice to do that. So you do have the opportunity, one little, maybe it's selfish, but fringe benefit of dabbling in academia, even when you are a private practice owner or associate, is it really keeps you up to snuff with all of your science and your evidence-based dentistry and your requirements. Like, oh gosh, there's nothing like 84 emails about your CPR research and your, child abuse and you get these constant reminders. Not that you wouldn't do these things anyway, but it's nice to have, to borrow the structure, if you will. Really, it elevated my personal practice care being at Penn and learning from my colleagues. So I will say that that's another benefit that I don't think too many people talk about. I think they should talk about more. It makes you a good dentist every day of the week, not just the days that you're there or somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay, what treatments do you do in a DSO? Do you get paid by production or by collection?
I guess I'll tackle that real quickly. In my particular DSO, we do all kinds of treatments. We expect our doctors to treatment plan and do the finest quality dentistry. The second question, you get paid by production or collection? I tell the same story. It's always by collection. When I owned my private practice, if I went to the bank to try to pay my loans and said I had a really good production month and I couldn't pay my loans, I guarantee you they wouldn't be fine with it. So it's almost always by collections so quick answer to that question.
All right. How long did it take for you to buy/open your own practice?
I can jump in. I was an associate in various settings, like I described previously, for 5 years before I got frustrated enough. And I think that that's really the description that I would say. I got to the point where I was like, geez, I'm really not looking for the owner doctor on a daily or even weekly basis. I feel very comfortable in my own skin. I feel comfortable with the procedures enough. Little did I know that it never stops, and you never stop learning and wanting to be better. But I felt comfortable enough that I was getting a little antsy, and so it took 5 years. I will tell you that my practice transition was unique in that it took 6 months to convince the owner doctor that I was the right person for his practice, which is very unusual. Typically, it's a transaction at that point in your career, but not with Dr. Swenda. Dr. Swenda was convinced that, and he had declined several full price offers because he was convinced that that wasn't going to be his legacy, that he was going to leave his patients in the care and the stewardship of somebody who he would want to see as well. So it took him quite a long time. And so it took 6 months for me to woo him. And, also it took 6 months to convince me, because that's a tall order. So it took a long time for both of us. Also, one of the requirements of acquiring my practice was that I complete the Pankey Institute courses. So that took time. It actually took me 5 years, but I started the process back then. I'm now complete with my Pankey training, but it takes time. It's a marathon. It's not going to happen overnight. There are a lot of things you have to work through. There's financing that you need to work out. Is this the place that you want to live? How far away is it from your significant other's work and school and anything else that you need to consider? So it should take time because it's extremely important. But for me, it took about 6 months to get to the point where I felt like I was ready once I found the practice that I wanted. 5 years till I became a practice owner from when I graduated.
Okay. How soon should we look for job opportunities if we are hoping to work straight out of dental school?
Never too soon. Start looking in your junior year if you know you're going to get a job after you graduate soon.
Okay. And I feel like we kind of answered how do you recommend to get ready for ownership, but would you recommend any course of administration or finances?
I think that having mentors is really key. So while all of us could recommend like a course here or like a webinar there, the truth is you've got to have people around you that you trust, that you can be honest with, that will be honest back. I think that's really key. So that's the biggest piece of advice, is to have people who will look you square in the eyes and say, that was a horrible decision. Why would you have done that? And I think it's hard to find those people, but when you do, it's also important to communicate with them. I think someone asked about communicating in the chat, right? Hey, I really respect your opinion. I want more of that. I want more of that honesty. Keep it coming. Can I count on you to be there for me? And can I ask you weird questions at 10 o'clock at night that are keeping me awake? Is that cool? And I think saying that just explicitly is super helpful. And I think more helpful than any just set of courses, but you'll find your path. Like you said, we're never done learning. So along the way, you'll find a glimmer of something that'll pique your curiosity, and yeah, chase that down. Continuing education, like learning more and growing better, is never a waste of time or money. That's the game we're playing. So don't ever feel badly about doing that.
Okay, and I did leave a question off because I didn't know that anyone had experience in it, but it was how do you get started in forensic dentistry?
Well, I got started in forensic dentistry through the military, but there are also opportunities if you, in most areas, when you're in private practice, I believe they are looking for people to serve, sometimes to work with the coroner as it relates to remains identification. And there are some organizations out there you can get involved with as well. I'll see if I can, I haven't done it in a while, but I'll see if I can find some of those organizations and I can maybe send that to you to share.
And the one is the American Board of Forensic Odontology.
That's it.
But
Yeah.
I think if you go there, I want to say it's in San Antonio where they have courses that you could do. And I think that's it. Because I was interested and I haven't gone down that path, but there's a dedicated course that would kind of get you started.
Okay, and I feel like we touched on how did you decide the military was the best route for you, but if you have any further information, feel free to share.
Yeah, I think I'll say that I didn't really decide the military was right for me probably until about 10 or 12 years into the military. I was always thinking about getting out. But I will share that what made me decide to stay was there were a number of things, really. The pay is actually pretty good. I think there are educational opportunities, like I said, for residency training. I actually had an opportunity while I was in the military to do a 2-year residency training program, and I also went back and got a master's for another year in national resource strategy through the military. So educational opportunities are a great advantage. Like I said, I think you have the opportunity to practice to your full scope of dentistry. You don't really have to worry about the cost when it comes to treating patients and providing them for what they need. You get 30 days paid vacation every year. You have an opportunity to travel and see the world. And so for me, it just seemed to be the right thing. It's not for everyone. I will share that. A number of people are not interested in the military and they don't pursue it. And like I said, it wasn't my long-term goal to do that for 30 some years. My plan was to do it for 3. Then I did it. After doing it for 3 years, I had an opportunity to go live in England. They always entice you. That's what the military does. You know, you do your 3 years and then they say, hey, how would you like to live in England? And I say, yeah, of course. So then I go to England and I'm there for 3 years. And then I have 6 years in. And then the military says, hey, we'd like to send you to a residency program. How would you like to do that? Oh, of course I would. So then you do that and you do your payback. Next thing you know, you're at 10 or 11 years and you have to decide what you want to do. But
All right. That is the end of the pre-submitted questions. Does anybody have any additional questions? You can either unmute and ask or type in the chat box. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's too many. I know we covered a lot tonight. So like Dr. Tucker was saying, a mentor is extremely important. So PDA does offer a connections mentoring program. If you would like a mentor, you can scan the QR code on the screen or go to padental.org/connections. We'll match you with a PDA member based on location, specialty, and practice type. We've had a lot of great success with students in this program so far. And Thursday, July 25th, I will be hosting an Ask a Specialist webinar. So we will have various specialties here to talk to you just about their program. You can ask any questions you'd like. If you're unsure about what you want to go into, this is a wonderful opportunity. So that is July 25th. You can scan the QR code on the screen. And then I will be sending a post-event survey. You'll receive an Amazon gift card for completing it. It will come from Pennsylvania Dental Association. And if you like what we've been doing, please feel free to leave a testimonial. The link is on the screen, and I will include that in the email as well. It's like Okay, just thank yous in the chat. All right, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to our volunteers for putting on a wonderful presentation. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.